Good evening and welcome to the third supporters presidential debate tonight. And tonight the participants are me and Ben tonight. On behalf of our presidential candidates, we'll treat this debate tonight as if it were the one we did last time. We have a variety of different issues that are going on tonight, and we're going to start with our opening statements, and we will just go along with the time as we can. So, Ben, you can start with your opening statement.
There we go. Personally, I'm for Gary Johnson for president for a few simple reasons. Number one, I agree with the policies for the most part. And number two, the other half of my support, really, or the other 40% of my support, is kind of as a protest to the two major party nominees. If someone like Jim Webb had been on the Democrat ticket, perhaps I would have supported him. If someone like Marco Rubio or Rand Paul were the top of the Republican ticket, I probably would have supported them. However, right now I support Gary Johnson because he is a good mix between responsible financial policies and tolerant social policies where we're not going to trample on anyone or anyone's rights, which is really all America is about, is letting you live your life how you choose.
I guess it's my turn to go. I support Hillary Clinton, as many of you know. I support her for a variety of different reasons. And one, I was, of course, raised a Democrat in my house, and I was actually raised between Democrat and Republican, which is interesting because I go to church, and of course I'm pro-choice, so being a Christian and going head-to-head with pro-choice can be difficult at some points. But I support Hillary Clinton for a variety of different reasons. And number one is that Hillary Clinton, I believe, is a good candidate in terms of personal and variety of different American policy issues. I believe that she is the best candidate to handle the wars in Syria versus ISIS terrorists. I believe that she and her Bin Laden situation really carry her far in knowledge on how to capture Baghdadi in Syria, and I believe that she's the best candidate for that. Another reason I support Hillary Clinton is economically. I do believe that charging an exit tax to those companies that are moving out of the country is also a good job. I believe that she's going to do that and use the money to use the tax dollars to create the largest investment in good-paying jobs since World War II. So, a variety of different reasons I support Hillary Clinton. And growing up in Illinois, it seems like it's kind of, nature to support a Democratic candidate or who's ever at the top of the Democratic ticket. But it really is a variety of different personal and political reasons that I support Hillary Clinton. And I believe that she will win this November, and I believe that she's the one that can move our country forward.
Just as a quick little counterpoint, an exit tax from an economic standpoint, which is kind of my area of expertise, an exit tax is actually not as effective as a tariff in preventing businesses from leaving. Because an exit tax is a one-time charge. It's levied on the entire wealth or net worth of the company. However, a tariff is a continuous charge on any goods being brought into the nation. Now, of course, this isn't exactly the greatest idea either way. Free trade, like true free trade, not this managed trade like NAFTA or TPP. True free trade is actually beneficial in many regards, provided, again, it's not managed free trade or crony capitalism.
Are you trying to make the point that a tariff is basically continuous charging of the business?
Yes, because it's a charge on all goods brought into the nation. So if I were to take my company and leave America, like let's say I have a $5 million company and Hillary's proposed exit tax is 35%. Okay, so you take 35% of that $5 million and charge it for me one time, and then guess what? I don't have to pay a tax anytime. I can make up those losses. But with a tariff of like 35%, which is outrageous, mind you, but with a 35% tariff, I'm having to increase my prices that much, and I'm losing business every single time I increase my prices because that's just how supply and demand works. When you shift the supply curve a certain way due to the price shift, I'm losing business every single time I sell just because that tariff increases the price of my goods. So it's definitely not beneficial for me to move out of the company for cheaper labor because I'm paying for that cheaper labor anyway. May as well just leave it here and not charge the extra and sell more.
Let me ask you this. What's the United States going to do economically speaking? What's going to happen if we charge a tariff? Let's say a company that makes cars moves over to China for cheaper labor. What are we going to do if we're trying to charge them continuously, but the Chinese economic system doesn't want that? Because we're going to cause conflicts if we continue to charge them a tax off the United States ground. Economically speaking, I mean, we can't just, it's basically saying that we are charging a tax on the Chinese economy. Charging an exit tax, however, is charging them a tax before they leave the United States. That's leaving their business, basically expertise, and leaving their employers behind. So we're charging them a tax of, you say, 35%, for instance, for leaving their workers behind and leaving what they had on the United States ground. But we can't charge a tax to somebody that is not basically American. Like, we can't charge a tax on foreign workers or foreign employee or administration if we are charged, if they're not on ground. So
we, as a nation, the United States, had done so for about a century and a half before Woodrow Wilson decided to convince Congress and a decent amount of state delegations in order to amend the Constitution to allow an income tax. Up until then, the United States was primarily funded through tariffs and excise taxes, like taxes on whiskey, taxes on tobacco, taxes on various goods and services. Up until then, those were the only ways our government was funded. Then again, our government only took up 3% of the GDP, so we could get away with it. Would I love for the government to drop down to that amount? Yes, of course. I don't see a reason that's a bad thing, especially considering the amount of economic growth we had in that period. We were one of the first industrialized nations. We industrialized a lot faster than other nations that people look to as great examples of socialism, like the Soviet Union, stuff, places like that. And you realize that, hey, maybe we don't need the huge government. I mean, technology progressed extremely rapidly in America. And as a matter of fact, America was one of those places people came to because you could experiment, you could try, you could succeed. And if you failed, you weren't going to lose everything.
But let me ask you this. You're still talking about tariff and how Woodrow Wilson did that. But let me ask you, was the United States dominated by businesses who just wanted to leave the United States during the time of Woodrow Wilson or Calvin Coolidge or anybody like that?
No, it was more,
economy.
The tariff back then was more to protect American industries from foreign goods being brought in. That's one of the ways we industrialize. Nowadays, it's more to protect American interests and to protect industry, or not really to protect industry, it's to keep industry here. It's not really a means of protection anymore.
My question, or economically speaking, is...
Oh, no. You are correct in your assertion that American industry didn't want to leave at that time because America had great laws. It was a great place to produce. There was no income tax. There was no corporate tax. There was basically no real taxes other than a few excise taxes. And sure, there were a few regulations on business back in that day, but most of them were stuff like, you can't overwork your workers. You can't have child labor laws. If you're going to be meat packing, you got to make sure that the meat you sell is fresh. You can thank the jungle for that one, as in the book.
I have another question for you on behalf of what we're talking about. Let me just ask you, say you're a Chinese, I don't know how to word it, but let's say you're somebody who works in the Chinese economic system. You have the United States coming across and, of course, booming your economy a bit. Arguably, the United States has a higher economy growth than China. Arguably, like I said, many people could argue that China's has a booming economy.
Did recently exceed the United States GDP, but then again, half of their GDP is government, so I take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, but my question for you is, if you're somebody who's working in the Chinese economy and trying to regulate this, how are you going to feel when somebody who's not even in your land is charging a company that decided to come to you a tax, a continuous tax, on behalf of the employers that you are employing there? Because that is...
Oh, they're going to be pissed for sure, but every single time that question gets brought up, I'm just going to say, we did it for hundreds and hundreds of years. As a matter of fact, everyone did it for hundreds and hundreds of years. As a matter of fact, China at one point had a complete ban on imports. So they really don't have ground to stand on in that regard. And not only that, but like I said, everyone had been doing it for hundreds and hundreds of years in order to protect their own industries and their own interests. Why is it any different?
Well, like I'm trying to say here, I mean, do you want to, of course, keep peace with China? Because we're on the verge of basically a tie in economic system. Do you want an economic war with China like we had with the Soviets over technology? Look, we
won the war with the Soviets, so I'm willing to take my bet against any socialist nation.
When Kennedy was president, we were in a race versus technology with the Soviet Union. Today, economy is a lot bigger issue. It's so much harder to balance and regulate an economic system. So do you want an economic war with China as we had a technological war with the Soviet Union? Because that's what this is going to turn into, say this kind of happened. I mean, we can't just and say, hey, we can just charge them on the foreign land, because they're going to get so mad, say China, former communist nations. I mean, think about it. It's all about economy. We cannot charge them a continuous tax on foreign land, because that will start an economic war, and we do not want that. Because we are so far in technology that whatever China, whatever Russia, whatever any of those countries launch at us, and what we launch at them is going to be so much more catastrophic than one business moving over to China and charging a tax on them, because we couldn't just charge a continuous exit tax because we didn't want them to stay open on foreign ground. So we can't just say, hey, let's just go over there and charge them a tax economically, because they're going to get so mad at us. We're going to start a war, and there's going to be a high death toll over nothing more than just a business moving over there. So, I mean... Well,
a trade war is a little bit different than an actual war. With a trade war, you don't really have boots on the ground, so to speak. You have more people just... A trade war is basically... You put economic sanctions on other nations, and you try and defeat them economically. You don't put boots on the ground. You don't put any actual physical resources into another nation. You just try to shut down their trade. And I'm going to take my bets against any socialist nation economically, because we saw what happened with the Soviet Union. They were collapsing by the time of Carter. Really, they were actually starting to collapse under the time of Nixon. Reagan didn't really accelerate the death of the Soviet Union all that much. Maybe by 1 or 2 years, he just put his foot on their throat and said, yeah, bye-bye. And that's really, that's how we would do it with China, is we would just cripple them by saying, okay, you don't want to deal with us? Well, we're not going to deal with you.
Where's that trade war going to progress? What's going to happen when we put imports into other countries and the other country gets mad. What are they going to launch at our trade sanctions on other countries? But
I'm pretty sure China, I'm honestly certain China is not ridiculous enough to, I'm certain that China is not run by somebody named Kim Jong-un, who probably is crazy and who probably is enough to destroy American shipping. China is not going to destroy American shipping. Sure, they may launch a few cyber attacks on American shipping. Sure, they may launch a few cyber attacks on us themselves. But if they actually attempt to destroy American shipping or harm American military interests, that's an actual declaration of war, and that's the last thing they want. Because here's the thing. No one beats America at war. That is the one thing no one's going to accuse us at. We win every military engagement we get into, okay? We may lose a few wars like Vietnam, but every single battle, like military field engagement, we actually win those. And against China, that would be conventional war. And you win conventional wars by winning on the ground. And you can't beat America on the ground.
You are coming from your slightly more conservative things, but
I'll admit I'm playing a little bit devil's advocate here because I'm not in support of tariffs. I'm just arguing that it's better than an exit tax, a one-time exit tax.
If you are the communist Kim Jong-un, whatever he is, nobody even knows that anymore.
Dictator.
Dictator, thinks he's dictator of the world. But if you are him, putting economic sanctions on other countries, what opportunities does that open up for countries that don't like us? Countries that are neutral against us. What does that put against people like North Korea? What opportunity does that give Russia? We can't just think about, hey, China's not going to start anything, but what opportunities and what anything else does this give to Kim Jong-un or Vladimir Putin in the Russian Federation?
We first need to stop thinking of Russia as an enemy and as a potential ally.
Hey, they will at all costs try to boot how our economic system is going. If our economic system is growing, Russia's not going to sit quiet. North Korea is not going to sit quiet. They're going to say something about it. They're going to do something about it. So if we're in a war with China, one of the two nations is going to war with Russia or North Korea, because what opportunities does this open up for them to boot somebody's economy? If North Korea has an opportunity to take the United States or China's economy, don't you think they're going to take that opportunity? I mean,
I don't really think North Korea is in a position to do that, considering they're one of the only nations that you can't see at night. I mean, you can see Pyongyang a tiny bit at night when you look at a satellite image, but North Korea is kind of, I don't think they're in a position to take anyone economically, let alone the United States. Russia, we need to stop thinking as an enemy, and we really need to start thinking of Russia as a potential ally. Because if we want to take that, if we really want to instigate China, if we're going to do that, we need to say, okay, Russia, listen, we've had our differences in the past. Let's move beyond them. Let's actually come to the table. Let's actually talk. Let's actually try diplomacy for once. Okay? Thinking of Russia is...
Can Vladimir Putin sit down quietly and have diplomacy? Can Vladimir Putin go through diplomacy? No, because he's going to attack America cyberly. He thinks he is the greatest person in the world, internet speaking, militarily, and he's not.
I'm not going to argue that last point. I'm not going to argue that last point because you are correct in that Vladimir Putin only cares about Vladimir Putin. And honestly, it's in his own best interest to have a powerful United States at this time, okay? If the United States loses power, who's the top power? That's China. If we help out Russia, if we decide, hey, let's extend the olive branch, Russia could potentially become the second largest economy in the world. Russia would potentially be an ally. And that's how we need to think. We need to stop creating enemies, and we need to stop thinking about nations that we've been arguing with for 60, 70 years. We need to stop and think, hey, perhaps it would be better if we worked together on this issue. And the other thing is, thinking of Russia as an enemy is so 1950s. It's so McCarthyist. It's passé, honestly.
We have to. No, wait. That's not getting towards. You're not defending the question I just asked you for a second there. Say China falls to the United States in an economic war. What opportunity does that give to North Korea that's just south of China? You're saying that North Korea, may not be that big, but if they're vulnerable to attack because they have no money, North Korea is marching there and taking that over because they can and they will. So we can't underestimate a communist nation who can easily take over an economy like China should they crash. And let's say we have no investments in our soldiers. There's Russia's opportunity to come to the United States if we have absolutely no. They are going to make us vulnerable to attack, and then they will attack us. It's not the best thinking, but you have to think if you're charging these nations this and starting an economic war over something as simple as a tariff, then that is going to happen. We're in the 21st, 20th, whatever century where if they want to attack, if they want to launch a nuclear bomb because we're vulnerable, they're going to launch a nuclear bomb. It's not per se anything that we can just sit around and continue to say, hey, they're not going to do it anymore. Because if China falls, there's North Korea, who's just grown 20%, 30, 50%, whatever, towards the United States. So now we have two current enemies.
Think about it. What is actually stopping North Korea from sending that hypothetical nuke right now? Okay? Let's avoid hypotheticals.
What's stopping them is they haven't had the opportunity to take over economically. What I'm talking about is that if they were to take over China's economy,
let's think about it here. That they can't take over economically. That stops them from turning the set of keys 6 feet across the room. That stops them from releasing the codes to their personnel with the order to use them. Not being in an economic position prevents them from doing that.
Vulnerable.
It's kind of
vulnerable to attack. It's not going to sit still.
Well, China's currently under your situation. China's still vulnerable to attack right now because anyone can walk into a nation. Yes. Okay, so what? They're strong economically.
If they fall because we're in an economic
France was strong. France was strong economically. France was relatively strong economically before World War II. Sure, Germany was stronger.
Yeah, but we're not talking World War II. We're talking nowadays.
The situations are similar.
How important they are.
The situations are similar. Both nations are shaky, relatively speaking, with the economy. The only reason why China's economy is the largest in the world is because they have 1 billion people.
Yeah, of course they're shaky, but I agree with you on the United States could take both those countries over economically if we wanted to, but we're not going to do it.
Honestly, we could wipe them off the map if we wanted to. Let's be honest here. We could wipe them off the map if we wanted to. We could turn them to glass, but that's just stupid. And honestly, it would probably get the ire of the rest of the world. So let's not cross that bridge.
Well, yeah, but you are going to the opportunity that you are suggesting that if we were to take them over economically, the whole world would be against us. But you have people like France who are actually scared of North Korea. And you aren't bringing my point into consideration at all. You are thinking about, hey, North Korea doesn't have the power to take over China. I'm thinking about China, if they were to fall economically, who takes that extra stuff? Who takes it? Is it just going to sit there and float in the air? Because Putin's sure not going to come down to China and take it.
No, you're correct. That there would be a power vacuum. There would be an economic vacuum. But there are a few very strong economies in that region. South Korea. there's Japan, there is India.
South Korea,
Those are
we aren't here meaning for another country to take it over. So if we have South Korea down there, they're not going to come if the United States doesn't want them to.
Taiwan is another good, strong economy.
Of the United States. They're scared to death of the United States.
South Korea is scared. No, South Korea is technically on our side. They're technically an ally.
Technically, but if they go up to China out of just nothing and destroy China's economy and use that as a power-sucking vacuum and make themselves stronger than us.
Now, I'm not in favor of regime change ever. However, we could technically shift through economic sanctions and other things. We could technically shift the power from China to Taiwan, create this reunification because of the complex political situation where Taiwan claims they rule China and China claims they rule China. And we could technically manage to shift the regime from the Chinese regime to the democratically elected Taiwanese regime. And technically it would be legal because both countries claim the entirety of China, which includes Taiwan. If we were to do that, and like I said, I'm not in favor of this plan, but that would be a legitimate way to fill that void without changing the power system, without changing the nation, without going through all these potential North Korea going crazy, which they already are, or filling it with another nation that could then become hostile to the United States. It would be a very beneficial situation to the United States, and I'm pretty sure that we wouldn't have these issues. In addition, the tariff issue that you're bringing where it would start a trade war, we're only charging the company. We're not charging the nation.
No, but that's part of their economy, so we're still charging their economic system. That's not balancing out correctly.
Not necessarily, because they're only producing in that nation,
the government,
and they wouldn't.
Their government got to be happy.
They're already paid.
Economy,
they would already
the
be.
States can't control what they're sending over or whatever.
Yes, but we can control prices in our nation.
Can't control
prices in their nation. An exit tax doesn't start.
We cannot force that company to pay a continuous tax if they are in China or Mexico. We cannot do that.
Okay, then why can we continue to force Americans to pay taxes in America?
Because they're on our ground. That's under the United States government, not under the Chinese government. We can't.
Okay.
We can do that.
Okay.
Under the Constitution.
But if it is wrong for me, the citizen, to take money, if it is wrong for me, the citizen, to take money from my neighbor, then why is it okay for the government to do this?
You're not taking money from your neighbor. You can't force money from your neighbor.
Then why can the government?
The government can because it's under the Constitution. I mean, our founding fathers started this nation because of tax. We paid tax.
We revolted. No. They started it because they hated taxes. They didn't start it because they loved taxes. They started because they hated taxes. Sure, they realized that to have a government and to have a nation, you had to have some form of income. However, they realized that you can't tax households' means of production. They realized an income tax was immoral.
If we don't pay tax, then how in the world are we getting federal tax? We're paying them money, and we are still getting stuff back for our charges. That is still giving us money. And despite income that we get when we pay and work, which of course is a source of income tax, if we weren't paying taxes, our economy wouldn't be running. We wouldn't have job creation. Jobs would be failing. Our roads would be failing. We'd be a third world country like Donald Trump thinks we already are. So,
would our roads really be failing if we let the private sector take over? Because that's highly unlikely, because everybody needs to use roads. Somebody is going to come in and build those roads. Sure, they would be toll roads, but
Where's the money coming from? Where's the money coming from?
Where's the money coming from?
Yeah,
the tolls.
The tolls. That's still paying money, isn't it? That's still paying federal
Yes,
money.
but you're cutting out the middleman, which will save you a little bit of money. Now, if you were to say have a minimal government that would perhaps say, okay, you can
save you a little bit of money, but if I go through tolls every day to pay money,
and they would say you can only charge tolls up until the road is paid for. After that, you are not allowed to charge a toll. That would be reasonable. And not only that, but why is a private solution worse than a government solution? We had roads, we had bridges, we had canals, we had infrastructure built before the government decided to take it over. That's why we had the guild.
The government
that is why we had the era of good feelings. No. This has been going on since the 1820s.
Dwight Eisenhower was the one that started interstate highways.
The interstate highway system, but roads had existed for centuries. They had existed in the colonies. They were privately built. They were built just because they needed to be built. There was no need for government to build those.
But today, who lays that concrete in that road? It is federal, state, governmental workers.
Actually, no, they're private. They're private companies that are contracted by the government, often at a much higher price than is necessary. And these road construction projects takes way, way longer than they actually need to. It's needless to say, a private company would do it much faster if they had a reasonable time schedule where they could say, okay, we need to be done by this point at this point and under this budget, because then they have profit to worry about. They have a profit margin to worry about. With the government, they can just say, oh, we're over budget by a little bit. That's okay. Charge the government a little bit more. They don't care about government money.
Can I ask you this question? Back to our original thought here. We don't want to get too far off of our thought process like Donald Trump, but let me ask you this. You don't work for the government per se, correct?
I personally don't. Both my parents are Army. Dad was a mechanic there for 20 years.
Okay.
My mom works logistics for the Army, so I'm not exactly sure how much I'm allowed to tell about that.
I'm not exactly sure how they're going to think about this, and what their stance is on this is probably much different than a Democratic stance. But
very much so. My dad is very much old school Republican in the mold of Coolidge, HW, stuff like that.
But let me ask you this. We as people, of course, we're paying that federal income tax, correct? Mm-hmm. Or we're paying that federal tax for living on our ground. So that's paying for what we do. They use that, or they're supposed to use that to benefit us, correct? They use that to pay federal workers who are basically governmental to build those roads. So are we just taking those, or are we giving them their, I don't know, responsibility for building that? The roads are the government in the 21st century. The highways are the government since Dwight Eisenhower. And that is the thinking that is going on in the country right now. And that just won't change.
But is it the response?
If you're driving down your street with your parents or whatever, and you say, "Oh wow," because I know this happened to me a lot. This has happened to me so much. If I'm driving down the road and we hit a big pothole or something and it blows our tires, is your parent going to say, "Whoops, that's our fault because we own these streets"? Or is your parent going to say, "Boy, the government should really fix that," or "Boy, the county should really fix that"? Because that's the thinking, I believe.
And here's the thing. I wouldn't have an issue with government-funded infrastructure if it was at the state and local level, but at the federal level, there's just no need for it. The federal government has much bigger fish to fry.
Mm-hmm. Well, we got into our own little debate questions of our own, so we should probably go ahead and...
Yeah, let's actually go to the first actual question we had. And the first one is about Confederate flag display. Are you for it or against it, and why? And Do you think do you think it continues portraying racism along the lines of the Civil War? Do you want to go first or me?
No, I'll go ahead and go first. Well, personally, and I have black in me, and I mean, some of my family's black, others my family is white. I think that it is unacceptable to portray the Confederate flag when the Union won that war. It has not changed over time. The Confederate States of America have fallen. They have crumbled. Their meaning has not changed, nor has their flag's meaning changed. Therefore, the Confederate flag is basically demonizing all those Union Civil War soldiers and veterans. It is demonizing the United States of America. It is demonizing our founding fathers. It is demonizing our president. It is demonizing our black people, because that's what that war was over in the first place. And that can't be changed. You want to know why it can't be changed? It can't be changed, one, because the United States government never came out and said, oh, since the war's over, the Confederate flag is just out there to be some just good meaning and part of history, because people aren't putting that on the back of their trucks for personal history. They aren't putting that on the back of their trucks for history. No, no, no. They're putting it on the back of their trucks 9 times out of 10 for racial reasons. Slavery has ended. Confederacy has ended. It has crumbled. The meaning of the flag has not changed. The meaning of that country has not changed. It should not be portrayed in the Union. The Union won. The Union won.
Okay, I'm going to
why is still portraying this flag if it means the same thing as it did 100 years ago?
The meaning has actually has changed in the eyes of most people. As a matter of fact, before you question it, I actually know a young African American. His name is Lionel. He owns a battle flag of the Army of Northern Virginia. Many, as a matter of fact, almost all southern states at least reference the actual flag of the Confederacy, which isn't flown anymore. If you look at it, it's got that 3 bars of alternating. In most cases, they change it to blue, though it was red and white in the actual Confederate flag. Georgia has a very famous history with this. As a matter of fact, Mississippi very prominently references both the actual Confederate flag and the so-called stars and bars. But most of the cases, and as a matter of fact, my in-laws who are Hispanic, they own a few stars and bars, by the way. Yeah. And the meaning of the flag has definitely changed in the eyes of most people. And the flag primarily means these days it's a way to talk about states' rights. It's a way to talk about smaller government. It's a way to say, listen, I don't need anybody telling me how to live my life. And not only that, but if we're not allowed to fly that, where does the banning of free speech stop? I don't care how asinine your cause is. As long as you're respectful about my rights, I'm going to let you speak about whatever cause you want to speak about, okay? If you want to talk about, I don't know, if you want to try and say you support ISIS, I'm not going to tell you can't do it. I'm going to say that's a little ridiculous and out there, but I'm not going to say you're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to support that. You're not allowed to express that opinion. And here's the thing, if we ban the Confederate flag or the stars and bars, the flag of the Army of Northern Virginia, then we're saying, okay, we're not protecting free speech. We're not protecting that. That's why government cannot ban this display no matter where, because there is something called the First Amendment, which very specifically states Congress shall make no laws abridging the right to freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, freedom of peaceable assembly, and freedom of religion.
But we live in the United States, and we're not getting back to the personal history of this. flag portrayed racism in the Civil War days. I'm not
questioning. No, I'm not questioning that part. I'm just questioning that the meaning has changed words meanings change all the time. Faggot used to mean an old woman. Now, it's just
the same as racism.
Well,
it's not the same as racism.
Racism. Then faggot eventually came to be a slur against the LGBT community. And nowadays, it's really just a way to say, hey, what the fuck were you thinking, faggot? And it can mean anybody. It doesn't necessarily mean the LGBT community anymore, though a lot of people will try and say it is.
The Confederate flag is not respecting black people. It's not respecting black people. And you mentioned that one black guy or whatever, who owns the Stars and Bars or whatever you said about that. And what I have to say about that is, if he feels obligated to go against his own kind like that, he's perfectly obligated to. The Constitution allows him to do that. I agree. We cannot take down the Confederate flags, but the most we can do is come out with a public different meaning of it.
Like I said,
a publicized, not just in our own reality, come up with a meaning, oh, this means states' rights. Well, has a president of the United States ever came out and said the Confederate flag, quote, means states' rights?
The president has never done that.
Barack Obama, has George Bush, has Bill Clinton, H.W. Bush, Reagan ever say that?
Well, here's the thing. Bill Clinton used it famously as campaign material for Clinton Gore. He used it famously in the South. I can pull up a picture if you want.
That's in the South. Where else are you going to get votes? It was at the time.
Where else are you going to get points? It was famously used in the show Dukes of Hazzard on the General Lee.
Oh, that's a white show. That is a totally white country show. And we can't really use that.
Before you ask, yes, I've seen it. It's a fun show. And yes, you are a bit white. It is a bit... You are a bit white. You are a bit right. It is very country. It's very rednecky. I'm not going to deny the bit of redneck that I have in me. That's natural. Okay, I think I get accusations of being a redneck every single day, and I don't deny them. Plaid is my favorite color, for example. I'm not going to deny that part. And so you're always going to hear me saying, let's get small government in my guns. So, yes, I'm a redneck. Guilty as charged. Do I own a Stars and Bars? Do I own a battle flag of the Army of Northern Virginia? No. Am I going to question people who fly it? No, I'm going to assume they mean the current cultural meaning, which is states' rights. And it doesn't require the president to come out and say it. It doesn't require the dictionary to come out and say it. Whatever the cultural meaning of it is the meaning. It doesn't require a source of authority. It requires whatever the common usage is. If people accept something as meaning such, they're going to accept it. It's just like in Orwell's 1984, the government taught people to think 2 + 2 = 5, and that's the way it wound up being, because everybody accepted it as fact.
If people are that stupid, well then okay. If people are that stupid to think 2 + 2 is 5, because the government said so, that's their own problem. But I want to tell you this. Black people, and to those of you who own Confederate flags, I am with you. I stand with you. I stand with the Constitution, and I stand with your rights, as any candidate ever, or any president ever has said. But black people are citizens of this country. And I may be wrong right now about the portrayed views that brings, but the government has never come plain out and said that means states' rights. So if you want to start a movement about the change in definition of the Confederate flag, then go ahead and start a movement on it. But until then, do not fly that flag in the Union. Do not fly that flag in, for instance, the state of Illinois, where Chicago is the black capital of the world, for the most part, I mean, if you think about it, and do not fly that flag where you are going to be rude and disrespectful towards the black community. Black lives matter, your lives matter, and you should think to yourself that all lives matter, not just your own. So we have to use that Confederate flag and start a revolution on the Confederate flag that says that it actually means states' rights, because that's what you said, correct, Ben?
Yes,
correct me if I'm wrong, you said that means rights.
And we do need to make sure that people understand that we're not using it as a means of oppressing people, because that is not our desire. I mean, the only people we want to oppress is the government, because the government is no, let's get rid of government. I'm not an anarchist, by the way. I deal with them all the time. They are just most anarchists just use it as an excuse to be assholes. I deal with a lot of anarchists all the time. They just use it as excuses to be assholes. So we're not going to talk about them. But we do as a society, especially the South, we do need to make sure that people understand it's not meant to oppress people. It's meant is a way to say that we want sovereignty delineated to the lowest common denominator, as in the individual. And we also need to make sure that we're not being so brash and brazen about it. And honestly, I've even seen the Gadsden flag, the famous "Don't Tread on Me" flag, being used as a way to say, hey, that's racist too, when it has never meant that. It's meant as a way to say, listen, if you're going to try and take my rights, I bite back. That was never a racist flag, though somebody apparently said it was.
This question reminds me of when I was on my debate prep, reading up on what I had read about that and poll numbers. A poll was released on what the Confederate flag meant in the state of Mississippi among 58% of white voters and 8% of black voters. It portrayed that black people basically should not, that's what that means, is that black people oppressing black people, essentially.
Well, wait,
it was released in the state of Illinois, and people said that they were, not in the state of Illinois, the state of Michigan. And among 60% of white voters and 2% of black voters, actually I have it here, it's 3% of black voters, it portrayed that it was states' rights, like you said. So that was nothing new to me. So here's the thing. South, you've gone a little too crazy.
I will not say do I think that it was wrong to raise, as Frank Underwood said in House of Cards, do not fight for the losing.
They're raising racism.
Do not raise your flag for an asinine cause such as slavery.
The South raises and flies that flag for the reason of oppressing black people, for a reason to bring black people that they aren't fair back up into civilization as we know it. The North flies that flag because we believe that states' rights is important. Now, let's put that together for a second.
Which is, I do think it's a little bit ridiculous that the North has does have the correct view, and the South is getting a little backwards according to that poll, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me because the South is the one that keeps fighting to push it.
Yeah. Well, let's say that this becomes an issue across the South and across the North. Of course, our government's never going to try to start another civil war, but
we don't want another Buchanan.
What in the world happens if we split countries again? Say Texas leaves the Union, followed by Oklahoma, followed by Mississippi, Louisiana, Alaska goes, and then we have
I can see
places
Alaska.
like Mississippi and Georgia, and all of them leaving right behind them.
So
This
let's
is going to start a
assume
new
that.
country.
Let's assume that.
That's going to start a
Let's
civil
assume
war.
that if you're going to assume that, let's just say that. If you're assuming that, I'm going to guess you say Texas, Louisiana. I'm guessing you say Arkansas, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. I'm assuming you'd say all those states would go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kentucky,
Okay, so you're going to include Kentucky in that. Kentucky was one of the states, slave states that didn't secede. I'm not sure. I don't think Virginia would. I don't think Virginia would do that. Florida is also hazy on whether or not they would, though. Same with Missouri.
too.
What?
I mean, my dad's from Florida. I said my
Okay.
dad's from Florida. He's African American, so it's growing black population.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm not sure if Florida would. So basically, what you're saying is most of the former Confederacy plus Kentucky, minus Florida, Virginia, and Missouri.
Yeah.
That's a fairly huge part of the country. As a matter of fact, believe it or not, the South is one of the largest voting blocks in the nation. And yeah, I don't think they would. I really don't think they would raise their flags again. I just don't see it, especially considering the Supreme Court of the United States actually ruled that secession was illegal. But I think we do need to move on from this topic, simply just because
we definitely.
The principle that the ban should not be that there's no reason to ban it. As a matter of fact, it's completely unconstitutional to ban it, like the state of South Carolina. And just one final point on it that I like to make: if it's on the graves of Confederate soldiers, I don't see a reason why it shouldn't be put on their graves, because that is the flag they fought and died under. I don't understand why people want to say you're not allowed to put that flag there. Okay, let's have a little respect for the dead.
And even back then, the Union would understand that. But so, moving on from this topic anyway, I'll go ahead and read the next one. And it is, should Obamacare continue? And regulations and stuff. I'll let you go first on that one.
Yeah, of course, I'm not a huge fan of Obamacare. Most of my life, I've actually been on a government insurance program called TRICARE, which is not the greatest. We don't get our glasses covered. We don't get chiropractors. We don't get, for a while, we didn't even get dentistry. And basically all this stuff had been covered by private insurance for a long time. There are actually a few things that still aren't covered under TRICARE that are required by private companies to be covered now. If I remember correctly, birth control is one of those, though I'm a dude, so why care? But I think a better solution would be to privatize it and allow people to purchase a la carte. That way they're only paying for what they get. That way premiums go down for those people. For example, I really only need emergency room care right now. In a little bit, I'm going to be needing basic family care, stuff like that. But
can I pause you just real quick for debate moderation reasons?
Yep, understand.
Yeah, can I just pause you right there real quick? Can we keep our responses short so we can get to at least the
Yeah. I'll try and shorten this. Yeah, no, I'm definitely in favor of a private solution where people are allowed to purchase a la carte. Insurance companies can sell across state lines. Tort reform is a huge component of what I would propose, where you're not allowed to sue frivolously for minor malpractice suits. For example, they prescribed it, provided it's a reasonably, like, if they left a surgical instrument inside of you that wasn't meant to be there, yeah, you can still sue them, but there's going to be a maximum limit. This will help reduce malpractice insurance costs, which will therefore reduce costs of actual coverage, which reduces price of insurance. And of course, allowing people to buy a la carte and allowing people to buy across state lines also reduces those. Texas had a similar plan. They've only been able to institute tort reform part, and that's one of the reasons why doctors love going to Texas, and that's why Texas actually has fairly low healthcare costs relative to the rest of the nation.
Yeah, and I'm trying to just do something to control my time here. Actually, both of ours for the most part, but I'm going to try to get a countdown started here because we both tend to like to go ahead of ourselves. So I'm just going to go ahead and give us 3 minutes here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's going to be really slow.
After this, I think we need to take a break because I'm going to need some water.
Yeah. I'm going to need to get something too. What I have to say about Obamacare is that Obamacare does help Americans, and I think it needs to be treated like that. The best thing that Obama's ever passed. I think we'll both agree that's just lunatic-y if that's the best thing Obama's ever passed. But I think we also both agree that the middle class is having trouble compared to the rich on how to pay health care. Donald Trump's son, Barron Trump, got sick all of a sudden. It's going to be nothing for Donald Trump to walk into the doctor's office without some sort of health care plan to pay for his son. On the other hand, if a black mother who works two part-time jobs and still struggles to put food on the table has to walk into a doctor's office, let's say there's no medical things here, how hard is it going to be for her medical fees? And I'm going to continue here just a second.
Oh, no.
And what I have to say about that is some medical systems do like to kind of essentially put limits on it so that the middle class families don't use that. You know what I mean? As they're basically a rich company per se, and there's healthcare systems out there, and you can go look this up because I've looked this up. There's healthcare systems out there that will actually put income you actually get in control of whether or not how much care you get on your own. Obamacare is one of those systems that does governmentally help people. It's not for people who are comfortable. It's not for the rich like Donald Trump. Those middle-class families, like I just used as an example, a black mother who works two part-time jobs, has to pay for her kids' schooling, has to pay for her kids' clothes, her kids' food, and still has to substitute some money for health care. And that means everything else has to be limited, which could be dangerous to life, quite frankly. And what I have to say overall, as a person who used Obamacare, it does really help, and I think it should stay in place. Should there be an expansion? No. Should it stay in place and be regulated? Yes. That's all I have to say.
Like I said, I'd personally replace the system with a more private solution, but I wouldn't want to replace it immediately. I'd prefer to phase the program out and make it so that there's actually a contingency plan, so that way people who are on Obamacare have a place to go. That way they're not just, oh, you're going to have to find it on your own. Like, we would set it up for you. We would make it easy for you to transfer it into a private plan that covers what you want. And the other part is I'd also consider making it so that emergency room care is never charged. Like, emergency room care is completely free of charge, and that it's never gonna happen. I know that, but if it was feasible to do that, I think that would be a reasonable way to get people who want the government solution on board, is to say, listen, we'll at least regulate it so that way emergency room care is free of charge. That way people who absolutely need it don't have to pay. Of course, then again, you're going to get that free rider problem with people saying, oh, I've got a cold, I'm going to sit, and then you get long lines at the emergency room. And of course, you're going to run into the problem of, do you have people volunteer to work the emergency room, or do you charge it on the people who are going in for checkups and stuff like that? So it's a huge problem, and we will need to work on it, but I don't think a government solution is best, and it just leads to insanely high taxes, especially if you were to go as far as a single-payer system like Senator Sanders suggested. Then you start running into the problems of where each American is paying $55 of every $100 they earn into the government, and they're not really using it all the time. They're not really getting all the services they get, and the average income in America is approximately 45 to 50,000. So basically, in Sanders America, you'd wind up only being able to use $25,000 of your $25,000 if you're an average American. And that's before you factor in housing, that's before you factor in state and local taxes, that's before you factor in food costs, car insurance, transportation costs. And pretty soon you're not going to be able to put any to retirement or anything, and the only retirement you're going to wind up having is Social Security.
Yeah. Okay, so from this issue, we're going to move on to a quick intermission here. And it's going to be just a couple minute intermission here for a second, so we'll be. Alrighty.
Yeah, sorry, I was just refilling my water. Needed to fill up my water filter, so I have plenty of this stuff.
Yeah. Okay, well, welcome back to this presidential. Welcome back to this presidential supporters debate. We just got off our last topic. Should Obamacare continue? You can go back in the pre-recorded video later on if you would like to. If you are just joining us and would like to hear our positions on that. Moving on to our next issue is, should marijuana be legalized recreationally, medically, or both? I'll let you start with that.
Well, I'm going to assume that if we legalize it recreationally, it would be legalized medically. And it really does need to be done both ways, simply because there are plenty of medical benefits to it. Can it cause some, slowness of wits with potentially repeated excessive use? I think Governor Johnson may be a prime example of that part, but I mean, considering his lifestyle where he climbs the highest mountain on all 7 continents, where he does multiple bike races in excess of hundreds of miles an hour, where he does Ironman triathlons, I think I can forgive him for using it a little bit as a painkiller, because it's less addictive than other painkillers. It's also, I'm not saying it isn't addictive, because it is an addictive. THC is an addictive chemical, just like nicotine, just like the active ingredient in cocaine, stuff like that. But it is a healthier painkiller than a lot of opiates that are prescribed. And also it's beneficial to cancer patients, because it increases when I say cancer patients, I mean people undergoing chemo. It is beneficial to them because it does boost their appetite. And honestly, why should it be allowed recreationally? Have you ever questioned, it's why I question why it's the same reason that we should never ban alcohol. It's the same reason why we should never ban guns. Prohibition didn't work in the 20s.
Yeah, I think prohibition would work. I mean, legalizing it all around. Of course, there would be those abusers.
Of course, but we have that with alcohol. We have that with firearms.
Yeah, but there would also, however, be those people who use it right. There's people who do use it for the reason you use it. Government would trust that people would use it mainly medically, because it's not something you want lingering around in a generation of middle school students. It's not something you want lingering around in a generation of elementary school students, which it is today. So that is my concern with legalizing it recreationally. Other kids will abuse it. And I know people who are way too young to be smoking marijuana, but they do anyway.
Mm-hmm. Then again...
And that's the only problem with recreational marijuana. People won't pay attention to the small kids. Oh boy, in Colorado, how many middle school kids daily do you think find marijuana to smoke?
Too many. I imagine too many.
Too many. Too many. Should they be smoking marijuana?
The same thing happens with alcohol.
But should they be? But it doesn't happen as much. But should they be?
Have you ever been on a college campus?
Should they be smoking a addictive chemical in the first place?
I mean, again, I'm going to bring up the alcohol example. Have you ever been on a college campus? Because I can assure you, freshmen get shit-faced a lot more than you believe.
Okay, but aren't most of the freshman students 19 or 20 or 18, 19, 20?
Very few freshmen are above the age of 20. And let's not even talk about high school. Oh my word.
I'm talking about to the 10 to 14-year-olds who sit there and smoke marijuana daily.
And a bunch of 10 to 14-year-olds manage to get their hands on alcohol too. We're going to have this problem regardless.
But can they walk into a store and get alcohol easier than they can walk up to a person? There's my time limit. There's your time limit, actually. But can they walk into a alcohol store and get?
No, but then again, they can't walk into a weed store and get it.
Listen. Can they walk into a liquor store and get alcohol as easy as they can walk up to a person on the street to get marijuana?
Well, in Colorado, they don't have to. I mean, they do if they're, underage, but in Colorado, they can't walk into a weed store and get it because they're going to get ID'd. And it's the same. honestly, you can probably you can print a false ID. You can have a straw man purchase. There are many ways that you can get around, the legal protections against these chemicals, these drugs. And honestly, if a prohibition on, marijuana were to continue, I imagine there would probably be at least one benefit of it. The sole benefit of prohibition of alcohol was it created NASCAR. Though I'm not sure if you want to call that a benefit. I wouldn't call it a benefit completely.
My personal policy is releasing it medically.
I agree. It does need to be released medically.
Medically, definitely. And people refrain from that, but it does need to be released medically. Recreationally, I think at the time, it's a little too risky that we will have young children having surpluses of access to these essentially drugs from people just off the streets. Now, there's not going to be as much of a problem of selling marijuana illegally if we release it recreationally. But think of our generation. That has to, we can't let that happen. We cannot let that happen. It's done deal.
I'm not going to completely question you on the fact that we need to make sure that there's education, similar to the way that we educate about alcohol. I think we need to have a reasonable age limit on the recreational. But I think we need to, have a standard age across the board. That way it's not like graduated. That way you're not getting graduated rights. I'd be all in favor of saying, okay, 16 is for everything. For driving, for alcohol. And of course, a lot of these, if you're with your parent, I think, except for perhaps driving, but if you're with your parent, I think a parent should have the ultimate discretionary authority on certain things, especially with like saying, okay, you can have a glass with your dinner tonight, or hey, if you want to eat this brownie, go ahead. But at 16, I think that's where it should be, okay, you can start making your own choices. I think the only one that I think we need to hold off on is perhaps military service, just because, that does take a little bit more maturity to be able to handle. And if we reduce it all to 16 and allow parents to, without fear of repercussions, if we allow parents to educate their children and tell them, okay, only a certain amount or only in moderation, maybe we'd be able to handle it like Europe has been able to handle it, because they clearly know how to handle themselves around alcohol and drugs, especially in Denmark. That is one thing I'll give Denmark a lot of credit for.
I think that the only privilege we should give high school students is driving, to be completely honest with you. They will abuse that. They will abuse the hell out of that.
They abuse the hell out of driving as it is.
You don't see it as much, though. You don't see abuse of driving because they're smart enough to know that they can be taken away. They won't take away marijuana.
The salutatorian of my high school repeatedly drove 50 miles an hour over the speed limit. Let's drive. And of course, I'm the lead foot in my family as well. So, trust me, you'll understand when you start driving. You'll understand that it's kind of hard not to abuse that right.
Yeah.
So, if we teach some responsibility, we'll have less of a problem.
Okay, so we had a little problem with our debate topic list. And I have it back up now. So our next question, and I want to make sure that this is in the debate before we have to stop the debate, and that is, should the United States continue to participate in the United Nations? Go first.
I'm going to lose my map real quick. Should the United States participate in the United Nations? I'm very skeptical of it now. I just don't. Like I said, I'm skeptical of it. I'd say let's wait. And let's see where we are. But if there's no indication that our position there is any useful, like the only useful thing we have is the veto power on the Security Council. We don't really have anything to speak of other than that veto power. And depending on what it is, we may have to submit to their regulations regardless. And those are things that, we don't really get representation on. And that's not something most Americans would want, is letting other nations decide what the hell happens within our borders.
Yeah, so what is your decision there? Yes or no? Really didn't keep...
Like I said, let's wait a few years before we make a final decision, but if it doesn't look like we're getting anything out of it, let's just pull out.
Yeah. I have to...
even though they say pulling out never works.
I have to agree with with your decision there.
I'm amazed I can tell that with a straight face.
Okay. I have to agree with your decision there that pulling out never works.
Just ask Billy Ray.
But I have to say that what we're risking in this is more war. And basically my topic on all of this is going to be war. We're risking more war. We're risking a higher chance of going to war with the Russian Federation. For sure, the Russian Federation. We're risking going into war with another country in the UN. And we're risking just too much peace. And I know that sounds, wait, what? Too much peace? There can't be too much peace. There can be too much peace. And I'll tell you what's going to happen if we have too much peace. For starters, if we make, let's say, we're allies with France. If we make a peace treaty with them, okay. But if we basically say, hey, we are going to rely on you to pick us up if we fall down, we're going to be leaning way too much on another country. Should they fall, it's going to be the domino effect if we rely on other countries for that. And the UN is basically what that's supposed to be pulling together. And I think that Russia's actually smart for not participating as much in the United Nations as the United States or France or...
Oh, yeah, no. They're only there for the veto power on the Security Council.
Yeah.
Which is basically the Security Council, for those of you who don't know, is a 15-nation board. If 2/3 vote in favor of a measure that's up on the UN, it passes, except for what's known as the Big Five, the 5 nations that don't rotate. 10 of them rotate. The 5 nations that don't rotate are the United States, the Russian Federation, which used to be the Soviet Union, France, the People's Republic of China, and I'm trying to remember what the 4th one is, the United Kingdom. U.S., France, Russia, China, United Kingdom. Yeah, United Kingdom was the last one. And those are the 5 nations that, if any of those 5 veto it, it doesn't pass, regardless of if the other 14 agreed.
Yeah. I have to say...
So I think that's the only reason why Russia hangs on.
Yeah, I have to say that, like I said, it's going to be the domino effect relying too much on a particular four nations, because we can't rely on ourselves for some reason. But it's going to be the domino effect if we rely too much on four nations. For one, let's play this out individually. We rely on China. Their economy crashes, and we rely on their economy to hold us up. For instance, let's just use this as an example. Then there goes our economy. Then there goes the people who rely on us. Then there goes the people who rely on us. The world will be in total ruins. Let's be real.
Perhaps. Then again, a lot of that is owned by China. If they collapse, I don't think they're going to be calling that in anytime soon. So,
yeah, and let's say we rely on the Russian Federation. They launch a nuke. We don't like it. We tell them we don't like it. They launch a nuke at us. There goes us. Then they're going to start a war with somebody else who's allied with us. Then they're going to start a war with somebody else who's allied with them. There goes the fall of them. Domino effect. It's basically like that for every country. And it can't be like that anymore. So I have to say that we should pull back from the United Nations a bit before we jump to conclusions on basically what we're doing, because it is important that we watch the domino effect before we go ahead and say, hey, well, let's just rely on France so much to this certain ordinary power. You know what I mean? I mean, it's basically, realistically speaking. It's like, something else is like, it is important that we include the fact that we are a country that relies a bit too much on other countries. We also, like a lot of countries, rely on us. We rely on them, they rely on us. It's basically like we are China's piggy bank. We're China's piggy bank, and that's what they agree with for some reason. So I have to say we can't rely on that anymore. And why we can't rely on that is if we are China's piggy bank and their economy crashes, then it's going to be all stuck on us. We can't have this big booming economy like some people want. I mean, we could, but it would basically make us look like total control freaks over the entire world, and that would start whatever we started in the beginning with tariffs and whatever. But we have to be sure that we retain from making a mistake when we're participating in the United Nations, because it's important that we look at how long we can actually survive with the United Nations, how long we can actually hold ourselves up in the United Nations as well. For instance, let's say that Russia goes to war with somebody. And I already mentioned this, but just to make this clear, Russia launches a nuclear bomb at the People's Republic of China. The People's Republic of China is going to expect us to do something. However, if we do something, Russia is going to launch a nuclear bomb at us. Let's say that's a successful nuclear bomb that hits Alaska. And another problem that will arise there is that basically, essentially, it will cause other countries to attack France, or attack whatever countries are allied with us, say France or something, or United Kingdom or whatever. It's basically going to cause World War III. The United Nations will boil down to World War III. And we do not need another world war, because what that will do is, in the 21st century, we have advanced our weapons so much and so far that it will demolish basically all of humanity. Okay, so
apparently it said my computer went to sleep for some stupid reason.
let's discuss what just happened there. Ben's camera went off, and I went on, and there was an awkward picture of you. And I was waiting for you to talk, and there was no talking. So I went on for about 5 minutes on what would happen if
dare I ask what that picture was?
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to let you talk a little bit about the nominations if you want to. You didn't hear anything I said, but...
Yeah, I really kind of got through my points of let's hold on a little bit and let's just stay with the veto power. Because that's really all that matters.
Yeah.
I just don't see it as something that's really necessary anymore. And yeah, like I said, that's basically my opinion on remaining in the nation. So let's hold on a little bit. If it turns out the veto power just isn't really worth, the price of admission, let's just pull out and say, listen, we don't really want anything. You guys know that we're not going to go crazy, at least provided, that we're not going to go crazy, and let's just agree to have our differences, and we'll be over here if you need us. We won't we'll be willing to help if, there's a world crisis. We're just going to focus on ourselves.
Yeah, and we didn't get through all the issues tonight, and I really wish we could have got through most of the issues, but that first tariff discussion got us off. We're going to try to end this precisely here at 8:30 p.m., but first let's have just a debate viewing moment of silence for the people in Haiti who got hit by Matthew. Mm-hmm. There were 271 deaths reported. 71 from Haiti and the Bahamas alone. Let's go ahead and have a moment of silence for that. Okay, and as we all know, that is expected today or already has hit Miami, Florida. 4 hurricane. It's expected to track up the coast of Georgia and eventually up to Georgia and eventually turn around as a tropical storm and re-enter the Florida area. As Hurricane Nicole comes from the east and is expected to get pretty darn close to North Carolina and Virginia. So it's important that we remember that very closely and remember. So that leads me to our final question as we lead into our debate. Which presidential candidate, which top party, main party, major party presidential candidate do you believe is the best for handling natural disasters and why? Ben, I'll let you go first.
Honestly, I think they're actually both equal. I'm not sure if I'm not.
We had a little problem with Ben's camera there. We're going to try to get him back to the best of our ability. as we wait for his question to be answered here shortly. So bear with us here as we try to get Ben back into this debate.
I don't know what's going on with my computer right now. It's being stupid. But basically, I think, like I said, I don't know if Trump's Louisiana flood response was a political stunt or what, but he did a lot more than I personally expected him to. I honestly expected him to go down for a photo shoot, pretend to help out, but he did bring a significant amount of resources with him. So I'm going to give him the credit there. Still not sure if it was a political stunt, but whatever. He actually did something significant. And of course, Clinton is of course going to respond to any natural disaster just because, you know, that's her job. And I would expect her to do whatever is necessary, similar to what President Obama has done. Whatever is necessary in the case of Superstorm Sandy and the like, because he did a very good job with his response to that. Like I said, I'm going to give Chris Christie all the credit in the world for saying, okay, I'm above this party politics, especially right now, because you know what? He did a damn good job helping us out.
Yeah, and I believe personally that Trump went down there for a photo shoot, and that, of course, he brought supplies with him. The fact was that he handed out toys to children for about a factual 30 seconds before he walked away to go shake hands with other politicians from the state of Louisiana. He knew that the cameras were rolling. He knew exactly what he had to do to look good, and he knew exactly what he needed to do to kick Hillary Clinton in the face. So he did what he could there, and of course he was successful because our poll numbers went down there for a while. But I believe sincerely that Hillary Clinton is going to be the best person for natural disaster response because that has been her job. Doubt that Trump's ever responded to a natural disaster like an earthquake in California or a tornado in Kansas while he was a businessman. He has no experience in that. She was First Lady, which she responded to a total of, and this is facts, 41 natural disasters in her time as First Lady, whether they were floods, tornadoes, or any of that. And, of course, she was First Lady for 8 years. As Senator, of course, it wasn't a natural disaster. It was a man-made disaster, but 9/11. As Secretary of State, she responded to, of course, Tuscaloosa. She responded to Superstorm Sandy and a couple more. I can't remember which ones, though. And I can't remember what she was at this point or if she was even anything, but she did respond to Katrina. And I'm sure she'll respond to Matthew, too, as soon as he goes up the shore. So we're going to wait and see, but I believe that she is the best candidate for natural and man-made disaster response.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my computer is just starting to, I don't know what it's doing right now. But I think that's actually a fairly good point to end on here. I don't really see any other issues to talk about. I don't really see a need for closing statements, especially with the way my computer's acting. Anyway,
okay,
thank you all for watching.
Yeah. Thank you guys for watching this presidential supporters debate. And our next one will be at an undecided time. Be sure to watch the presidential debate on Sunday, which will be a town hall type debate. The participants will be Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. That will be airing on pretty much all media sources in the nation and maybe even the world. So, American vacationing in Japan, I'm sure you can still find the presidential debate somewhere.
At the very least, you'll be able to live stream it. I guarantee that.
And, yeah, it'll be live streamed through YouTube. I promise you that.
Probably Twitch.
You can, yeah, probably. You can find it through all different sources. And be sure to look for me and Ben's presidential election predictions starting probably this weekend, depending on how Ben's Wi-Fi wants to.
Yeah, no, I'll probably be able to upload it tomorrow. I think this is the only app that's ever. I think this is the only thing that's. This program is the only that we're recording on right now. I think it's the only one that's actually giving me any issues currently.
And another thing is, Election Day is what, 34 days away?
Something like that. It's November 8th. So if you are which is actually the latest possible day to have an election day. Cool little Jeopardy factoid. But if you're a registered voter, please go out and vote. Don't really care who you vote for, because it's your duty to vote for whoever you feel like is best capable of leading the nation.
Yeah, so hopefully our policies got over to you pretty well today. So thank you for watching this presidential debate, and we will be sure to let you know in advance next time when another presidential debate will take place. If you would like to be part of our debates by asking questions to us live on the debate, be sure to get in contact with me and Ben privately in the comments, or figuring out some sort of email address or some way to get a hold of us somehow. And so we will be trying to host a town hall type debate live on here sometime, probably after the next presidential debate.
And hopefully we're able to get a Trump supporter involved, because that would be fun. Can't wait for him to shout out, and we're going to build the wall and Mexico will pay for it. I can't wait to hear that line. Because that is not
watching. Thank you for watching, and join us next time.
Yep, thank you.
Bye.